The American Civil War, a brutal conflict that tore the nation apart, officially ended in 1865. The abolition of slavery marked a turning point in American history. However, the end of the war did not bring an end to the deep-seated racial prejudice and discrimination that fueled the conflict. Over a century later, the legacy of slavery and segregation continued to cast a long shadow over American society. The civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s fought tirelessly for equal rights and opportunities for Black Americans. Through protests, sit-ins, and legal battles, they challenged Jim Crow laws and demanded an end to segregation. The movement achieved significant victories, including the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. These landmark pieces of legislation outlawed discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. Despite these hard-won gains, the fight for racial equality was far from over. The civil rights movement exposed the deep-rooted nature of racism in America. It also revealed the limits of legal reforms in addressing systemic inequalities. While legal segregation was dismantled, de facto segregation persisted. It manifested in various forms, including residential segregation, economic disparities, and unequal access to quality education and healthcare. The assassination of prominent civil rights leaders, such as Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X, further highlighted the immense challenges and dangers faced by those fighting for racial justice. Their deaths left a void in the movement and underscored the persistent threat of violence and backlash against those who dared to challenge the status quo. The civil rights movement's triumphs were significant, but its unfinished business laid the groundwork for future struggles for equality. The civil rights movement's successes triggered a backlash among some white Americans. Many resented the dismantling of the racial hierarchy that had long benefited them. This resentment fueled a conservative political shift. Politicians like Richard Nixon capitalized on this sentiment. They appealed to what he called the silent majority. These were white voters who felt ignored by the cultural and social changes of the 1960s. Nixon's Southern strategy was particularly effective. He appealed to white Southerners who were resistant to integration and civil rights. This strategy helped to solidify the Republican Party's dominance in the South. It also shifted American politics to the right. This shift had long-term consequences for racial equality. It led to policies that often disproportionately disadvantaged Black Americans. The backlash against the civil rights movement was not limited to the South. It manifested in different ways across the country. White flight from urban centers to the suburbs accelerated. This left cities with dwindling tax bases and struggling schools. The backlash also fueled resistance to affirmative action policies. These policies were designed to level the playing field for minorities in education and employment. The conservative resurgence of the late 1960s and 70s had a profound impact on the trajectory of racial progress. It created a political climate that was less receptive to addressing racial inequality. It also laid the groundwork for policies that would contribute to mass incarceration and the erosion of economic opportunities for Black Americans. The backlash was a stark reminder that the fight for racial justice is an ongoing struggle. It requires constant vigilance and a commitment to dismantling systemic barriers to equality. The 1980s saw the rise of the war on drugs. This was a set of policies ostensibly aimed at reducing drug use and trafficking. However, the war on drugs quickly became a tool for racial control. It disproportionately targeted Black and Latino communities. This was despite the fact that drug use rates were similar across racial groups. The war on drugs led to an explosion in the prison population. Mandatory minimum sentencing laws for drug offenses resulted in lengthy prison terms. These sentences were often applied more harshly to Black and Latino defendants. The result was mass incarceration, which devastated communities of color. The war on drugs was fueled by racist stereotypes and rhetoric. Crack cocaine, a drug more prevalent in Black communities, was punished more severely than powder cocaine. This was even though they were pharmacologically similar. This disparity in sentencing contributed to the racial imbalance in the criminal justice system. The war on drugs was not just about law enforcement, it was also about social control. It was used to demonize Black and Latino communities. It justified increased surveillance and police presence in these communities. The war on drugs had a devastating impact on families and communities of color. It continues to have ripple effects today. Section 4. The concrete walls of segregation fall, but invisible barriers remain. The civil rights movement successfully dismantled legal segregation. Jim Crow laws were struck down. Black Americans could vote and participate more fully in society. However, the end of legal segregation did not mean the end of segregation in practice. De facto segregation continued in various forms. Housing discrimination was a major factor in perpetuating segregation. Redlining, a practice where banks refused to grant mortgages to people in certain neighborhoods based on race, was rampant. This practice made it difficult for black families to buy homes in white neighborhoods. It trapped them in segregated communities with fewer resources and opportunities. Generational wealth gaps also played a significant role in perpetuating inequality. Decades of discriminatory policies and practices left black families with significantly less wealth than white families. This wealth gap made it harder for black families to access quality education, healthcare, and other opportunities. It also made it more difficult to recover from economic downturns. De facto segregation in education persisted as well. Black and Latino students were more likely to attend underfunded schools. These schools often lacked the resources and experienced teachers of their predominantly white counterparts. This disparity in educational opportunities contributed to the achievement gap between white students and students of color. Section 5. A new generation rises. Black Lives Matter and the fight for justice.